Of the Overseas Press Club. Welcome, thank you for coming. I'm going to say a few words about the OPC, and then introduce Dan. Some of you I know are from the Foreign Press Association, and we do a lot of programs with them too, but we're focused more on correspondents that work for news organizations whose audience is based in the U.S. But we now, if any of you are under 30, we have a discount membership for $20 for people under 30, as we're trying to do more programs that are of interest to journalists who are just beginning their careers. And we, as you can see today, we stream and videotape the program for our website. So there's a training archive on there that you can go back and look and see previous programs. And we also, if you're just starting out and you don't work for a news organization that can give you an ID, we're now providing active journalists with a free wallet size press card and a bigger badge one for $50 if you want it. There's so many freelancers now going overseas that we think that'll be something that'll be useful to people. So you can go on our website to learn more information, or there's applications there. A copy of our Dateline magazine that we publish every year at our annual awards dinner. So thank you very much for coming. As you know, this is Daniel Sieberg. He's an OPC governor, and he's the global head of media outreach for Google, and he'll talk to us about Google Media Lab. Thanks.
Cool, thanks, Patricia. Thank you all for coming. I love talking about news and technology, whether it's to a group of 500 people or 10 or 12. So thank you all for making the time tonight to come out. And hopefully this is something of a dialogue. Patricia has generously given me an hour up here to talk, but I definitely won't use up all that time. So please be thinking of questions. I'd love to turn this into a conversation as much as me presenting about what the News Lab is about. So a quick shout out to the OPC and working with the Overseas Press Club. I'm going to call out my former colleague, Sean Carlson, who's in the back, who actually helped to create that partnership, that relationship with OPC going back about 5 years ago. And we've found a lot of value in this in working with the OPC, whether it's the awards dinner or networking with some of the folks who are part of the OPC. We have a great, I think, community relationship. So we'll think about ways to grow that in 2016. So for tonight, I'll get into what the News Lab is about. How many people have heard of the News Lab? Let's just start there. No, 2 people who I would expect to be. So I'll get into what we're about and how we're distinct from other teams at Google who think about future media and journalism and news and that kind of thing. And I want to do that. I'll just run a short video that hopefully is a bit of a scene setter for who we are and what we do. So.
Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And some of the most important information out there today is quality journalism. We believe that the democratization of media has created new opportunities and new roles for journalists to play in the media industry.
The News Lab is Google's effort to use our technologies to be part of this innovation in journalism that's happening today.
We're really focused on how we can empower journalists and media entrepreneurs through tools, data, and programs.
I think it's extremely important that we come in this very collaborative fashion and say, what is it that we can do? We see that journalists tap into a number of different tools. We have Fusion Tables, which is a data visualization tool using Maps itself, Google Earth, ways to really get a sense of perspective around where a story is taking place.
There are 3 billion searches performed on Google every single day. And being able to look across these searches and look for trends in what people are curious about gives journalists a new tool for telling data-driven stories.
Another way that the News Lab is working with journalists and startups is through a series of programs that we're launching.
One of our partners is the Center for Investigative Reporting. And we've produced a series of events called Tech Breaking. The idea is to bring together technologists and journalists to really unite around an important idea.
We have a partnership with Storyful, and we're working to create a YouTube Newswire, a tool that pushes verified user-generated news clips to newsrooms around the world. We're also working with Matter VC, a media incubator in San Francisco, and we're helping them expand their curriculum to a far greater number of startups around the world. We're at a time when really anything is possible in media. Innovation and storytelling is taking place all over the media ecosystem. And we believe the best way to create a more informed society is when journalists and technologists work together. And that's why we're here.
All right, that's our site. You can see at the bottom there, g.co/newslab. So I can go through that site in a little bit if people want to see a bit more about it. But really what it is it's an overview of what the team does. But perhaps more importantly, it's an online portal that's full of tutorials for journalists to walk through different tools. Hey, welcome, come on in, at your own pace. So these are, some of them are driven by video, some of it's done through text, but it's just about every Google product you can imagine that would apply to journalism, whether it's Fusion Tables, Google Maps, Google Earth, Trends, Google Consumer Surveys for polling data, all kinds of different products. And we've structured this curriculum really based on feedback from journalists and what we've heard from them in terms of what's important. So I would encourage you to check that out, and if we have time later, I'm certainly happy to go through the site in more detail. So you saw from the video the sort of three pillars of what the News Lab is. So the tools piece, which is the training and education arm of what we do, and we spent time in a lot of different newsrooms talking to a lot of journalists, and I'll share some of the data. Some of the team for the folks in here who are from the Foreign Press Association. We just got back from, or not I didn't, but some others on the team got back from Asia, from Latin America. We're really trying to have a global perspective with what we do as the team. We're a small team, by the way. I should point out that we're about 12 of us full-time. A handful are based here in New York, some are in Mountain View with Google's headquarters. We've got somebody in DC, someone who's in Boulder, and then we have News Lab leads who are based in other parts of the world. I'll get a bit more into that in a second. And then data, so Google Trends is something that our team is responsible for in terms of the look and feel, and we relaunched it earlier this year, really with a focus on journalists and getting real-time data out there. So we worked with that product team to make that happen. And I'll show you some examples of how newsrooms are thinking about Google Trends data. And then we have a number of different programs, some of which we mentioned in the video, but we also work with Hacks Hackers. If anybody here a member of Hacks Hackers? Okay. We work with Matter, Center for Investigative Reporting. There's a group in Europe called the European Journalism Center. And anyway, we've got a number of different initiatives, which I'll get into sort of in more detail. So this, at a high level, is just what we're up to. Tiny bit about me, just so you know what my involvement is in all this. I joined Google a little over 4 years ago. Prior to that, I spent about 20 years as a journalist working at CBS News, at CNN, at ABC. I started at the Vancouver Sun. I worked in print. It was a long time before that. Started in web, did a master's degree in journalism at the University of British Columbia, etc. So that was sort of preamble to starting at Google. The News Lab team, such as it is today, has really only been around for about 6 months. We had various efforts that were going on within the company. I led a team called Google for Media. Other people were doing editorially focused initiatives. But our aim with the News Lab was to bring together some of these sort of more disparate ideas and initiatives under one umbrella as the Google News Lab. So we sort of put it together. I would say anybody who's familiar with the startup world, we put together the News Lab almost with a bit of a startup mentality. There were just this very small group of us. In fact, it was the 3 people you saw in the video, Olivia and Steve and I. And we came together and we thought, okay, what is this going to look like? What are we trying to accomplish? We really had nothing to go on except some of the existing pieces that were available to us. And so here we are today. By the way, the reason I put that image of the story from BBC Radio 4 up there, this is one of my favorite stories from 2015. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, I encourage you to do so. it is a fascinating way of telling the story of airstrikes in Syria. And what they did was they used a series of tones and frequencies to compare how many sorties are being flown now in Syria compared to the Iraq invasion and then compared to World War II. And you'd be kind of surprised to learn just how much is happening there in terms of the airstrikes. And they do it in a really powerful way using audio. For me, it was sort of a low-tech way to tell a really compelling story. If you listen, I actually felt quite moved after listening to it, and I bet it took a very low-tech sort of approach to it, but I thought it was incredibly innovative. So I just thought I'd share that. All right, so let's dig into the tools piece a little bit. I mentioned that those numbers are actually now out of date. We just recalculated some of our data, and it turns out we've talked to closer to about 23,000 journalists. Now this goes back about 3 or 4 years, but you can see we've tried to be as active globally as we can be. I've been on some of these trips. Some of them are done by others on the team, but we've got, and this is where I would love to, talk with you folks or, Patricia and others about what else we can do globally, because, we've got a bit of a beachhead in Europe. We've got some full-time folks and some others who we've hired, and we work with different organizations in these other parts of the world, and there are Google offices there, et cetera. But we're trying to think about how to sort of systematize a little bit of what we do in the right partnerships, especially as it pertains to the training part of what we do. We attend as many conferences as we can in the calendar year. You'll see us at SPJ and ONA and insert news acronym organization here. We're often there either doing trainings or we're meeting with folks. It's obviously a way to kind of get out into the community and meet with people, which is something we try to do a good bit of. And then I mentioned the site, which again we can go through if there's interest in time afterwards. It is there are now 35 lessons across Google's products. If you're interested, and again they're all tailored for journalism. This is not a sales pitch. This is really hopefully practical, real-world based stuff. And it is translated into 18 different languages. So for all of you who are thinking about, letting your newsrooms know or, that kind of thing, and we'll be hopefully expanding that list in the near future. We work with lots of different organizations. I point out this one because it pertains to some of the training work that we do. So we partnered with Pointer and with SPJ to train up these folks. They were interested from different parts of the country to get a better understanding of our tools and to take that knowledge back into different newsrooms. So we created this media partnership training network, and we'll hopefully be growing that into 2016 as well. And speaking of that, so this is our ambitious goal for 2016. We want to find out if we can possibly train 100,000 journalists. And when we first talked about this, we got into all sorts of debate and discussion around philosophically, what does it mean to train someone? What type of experience is that? Is it an online one? Do they spend 10 minutes on the site and that's enough? Does it have to be an hour in person? What are the learnings? What are the takeaways? At Google, we love to really dig into the semantics and the data. So we arrived at this number, and there's it's continued to be some debate about what this means. But really what it is sort of for us a bit of a beacon or a lighthouse to think, what could we do to reach more journalists? And, I think we've done some sort of back of the envelope calculations around like how many journalists are there in the world? And of course, then you can get into what defines a journalist, and, you can go lots of different directions. But, we thought, okay, maybe what if there are 2 million journalists in the entire world? That includes everybody from bloggers to graphic artists to everybody involved in journalism in some capacity, telling stories for an audience. 100,000 starts to sound like not that much, because that's really only about 5% of journalists out there. So for us, it's a bit of a motivator and kind of thinking, what else can we do? The reality is we cannot meet the demand. We get far more sort of incoming requests to train journalists and interact with them than possibly ever fulfill. So anyway, stay tuned. Hopefully have an update on that next year. And then a lot of what we do is part of the Digital News Initiative. How many people have heard of this, the DNI? Okay, well, that's fine. It's really very much aimed at European publishers, for anyone here who's thinking about that space. This was launched earlier this year, and the three pieces of the Digital News Initiative are product development. So there's a lot of work being done between Google's product teams and a number of different news organizations to look at what are the either changes to existing products or creating new tools for news distribution or for monetization. What is it that we as a company should be thinking about? So one of them, which if you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to, are accelerated mobile pages. Anyone come across this? So, or AMPs, as the acronym is known. And this is the idea of making the mobile web faster and allowing people to consume news stories on mobile devices in a way that is open sourced. It's an open source initiative. We've worked with, I want to say, thousands, hundreds at least, of different newsrooms to think through the technology and get it into the right hands. Because I'm sure, as many of you know, if you go to open up a story on the mobile web, it maybe isn't the best experience. Whether it's the analytics that are bogging it down when you try to load it, or the ads, or whatever it is. So this is a way to hopefully greatly improve that experience for people, so they don't kick off to some other platform or some other place to consume it. So that's one example of some of the work that's being done in that space. There's an innovation fund that we made available, 150 million euros, that was made available to newsrooms across Europe. In fact, any sort of news organization, doesn't have to be some huge established player. And the first round of that funding, the first round of the applications for that funding just closed last week. So the team, there's a team that's very removed, almost in sort of a church and state way, to review these and to see where the money can go and to foster innovation primarily in Europe. And then the training and research part of the DNI is where we come in as the News Lab. And part of that has been growing the people who work with us there. We have News Lab full-timers or News Lab leads in the UK and Germany, and hopefully somebody coming soon in France. And then these folks work with us as media training specialists, essentially, and they go into newsrooms, as you can see, in Poland, Central Eastern Europe, in Italy, and in Spain. And they're doing this actively day to day in that capacity. We're also looking to expand the curriculum that we have on the site. So if you go there today, I mentioned some of the products that are there. But what can we put up there for accelerated mobile pages so that the right developers and newsrooms can access that in a simplified way? VR, boy, we could spend a whole hour talking about VR, couldn't we? This is something on the team that I've been spending a lot of time researching, and everything from YouTube 360 to cardboard to different ways of distributing content. So what is it we can do in that space? Monetization is a topic that comes up a lot. We're not the experts on that, but who could we be connecting newsrooms to figure that out a bit better? Security for journalists, I think, especially for a lot of foreign and international journalists, when you think about online security, keeping your sources safe, protecting your password and your identities, and so on. I mean, there is a team at Google that thinks a lot about this. Google Ideas has also done a fair bit of this stuff with Project Shield, which, if you haven't checked it out, they do a lot of work with newsrooms, especially a lot of smaller newsrooms, and in places where they're targeted by very corrupt organizations. So let's say it's a small newspaper in Ukraine or something. Project Shield is about helping those newsrooms protect themselves from DDoS attacks or being basically shut down on the internet. So it's very much a sort of a freedom of speech or freedom of information type of an initiative. It's a way of giving those newsrooms kind of, this is in a bigger way for an entire newsroom, that online security that they need to survive. And then individually, we're thinking about, you all, and as a journalist, what do you need to know to best protect yourself when you're on the internet? And then verification, which I can get into a little bit more in a second, but we have a number of initiatives around this. So verifying user-generated content, or as we often refer to it as eyewitness content. So what is it that if a citizen is in Paris capturing some of the horrific events from the shooting that took place there, what is it that newsrooms should be thinking about when they see that content posted on Twitter or on YouTube or wherever else? And this is a coalition that we've brought together, and I can show you some of the different partners involved, but a very sort of cross-industry coalition to think about a set of standards or principles for newsrooms to think about when you come across this content. And we all know the sort of fog of war and the realities of things that happen and deadlines, and everybody's pushing to get this content out right away. But what are sort of the best practices to avoid the pitfalls that we see in so many cases so that that content is verified as best as it can be before it goes out? So we have an emphasis on getting that out through our site as well. And then of course we all know 2016 election. So our team is doing a good bit with the elections, and we are going to be structuring a lot of our curriculum for that. So whether it's through Google Trends data or search or whatever it is, we want to make that available. I'll just go through Google Trends a little bit. How many people here have used Google Trends or have seen it or check it out? Nobody. So there's an opportunity here. That's how I see it. For the international folks in the room, there is plenty of data from lots of different countries. This is not just for the US. So we relaunched it earlier this year, as I said, with an emphasis on this real time. So it used to be that you had about a 36-hour delay in terms of seeing the sort of most current data. We've gotten that down to a few minutes. So you can really start to see what people are searching for. We'll give you a bit of a line graph there so you can see the spike that's happening. And then this is a scrolling, sort of a never-ending or infinite scroll of the stories that we see that are trending across YouTube, Google News, and through search. So this algorithm is really looking across a lot of different platforms. So it can be quite addictive when you go there. You can just sort of see all of the different stories that are trending through our data. And then we've worked a lot with a variety of different news organizations. You could probably throw one out. We've done something with them. But it's everything. These data visualizations are often done by the newsroom. We just provide them with the raw data. It could be around a particular subject, like helping Nepal. You can see the one from Mashable. We look a lot at very temporal events, so the debates. People searching for gun control, or something like from the last Republican debate, where people were searching for welding jobs compared to being a philosopher or something. So those kind of moments that pop out. Some of the data visualizations that we have are a little more horse racy, if you will. This is what we do during the debates. So we look at who's trending the highest, which candidates are trending the highest at different points in the debate. And we're working on this tool too. For example, we want to be able to show at the end sort of like who was the average, the highest, rather than right now it looks like whoever's in the end is the one.
Sorry, does this mean the number of people that are typing those candidates' name in the Google browser at that time?
Correct. Yep. It's not the raw data of people, but it's a relative comparison of people. Yeah. So we put this out typically right after the election. By the way, we post all of this on Twitter. It's all publicly available if anyone is interested. People can embed this. Our Twitter handle, I'm going to give it at the end, but this is the kind of thing we make available to anyone.
Does it mean anything, or is it just who's talking at that time?
I guess that's up to analysts, right? you can sort of overlay what they said at that particular moment if you go back and maybe look at a transcript or something. I think does search interests indicate who won? I think it's certainly open up for discussion. We have seen, for example, in the UK, we put out the data for people who were searching David Cameron and all of the different candidates in the UK election. And our data actually matched the results pretty closely at a time when tons of pundits were saying, oh, that government has no chance and so on. We released all that data based on search, and it was pretty close. So Does it happen in every case that matches? No, but one of those things that we leave it to the experts to look at. And then we're also thinking about other data sets that we could include. And again, this is all anonymized, aggregated data, to be clear. But hopefully it's the kind of stuff that provides some useful insights. Google Trends in more countries. It is available in, I forget exactly how many countries, or whether I put in a slide that has a number. No, I didn't. But this is available in a lot of different countries, and it's all localized based on languages and that kind of thing for search queries. So if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to do so. And then you can also play around with the data. You can go in, and if you have your own query in mind and want to see what was trending over a particular period of time, the data goes back to 2004. So you can really start to get a sense of sort of perspective around a particular issue or topic. And then programs. So I mentioned Eyewitness Media, and this is something that our team has spent a good amount of time focusing on. So YouTube Newswire, which is this feed of verified eyewitness content that we work with Storyful on this, and they're responsible for putting this together and sending it out. And they do this there's a curated email that goes out daily. So if you're interested in signing up for that, you can email our team. And again, I'll put all that contact information up at the end. We've worked a lot with Witness Media Lab. So they've recently produced something around police brutality and these types of eyewitness videos that they're trying to get out there, and we're working with them to think about ways to foster interest in this type of subject in newsrooms. And then First Draft, which is this coalition of, you can see there, these different organizations, as we think about what are the right principles and guidelines for newsrooms to think about with any sort of eyewitness UGC content that they come across. This is too much on First Draft. And then Matter. So we do a good bit with entrepreneurs and media startups. In fact, today we have a Matter demo day that's taking place at the Google New York office. And so in this case, we bring together some thought leaders and experts at Google with these media startups and kind of give them hopefully some guidance. We don't fund these startups. We kind of give them just about everything but that. And some of the projects that are coming out of Matter are fascinating if you haven't seen them, but they're doing some amazing stuff. They're based in California. They're the biggest media startup VC. And then with Hackers, our aim there with them is to kind of grow the really nascent ideas in the startup field. So if Matter is taking these companies that are sort of past the seed level, if you will, Hackers is about generating these kinds of ideas with people who are at a very early stage of a media startup. It's not about an accelerator or something like that. It's very early on in the process. We've done an event in Berlin. We've got one coming to New York here and in London. And again, it's entrepreneurship, and in a way that brings together the Hackers community, which is all about technologists and journalists, and then hopefully whatever we can provide from Google's standpoint to help to foster that. With Center for Investigative Reporting, we do these tech-breaking events that are often sort of driven by one particular theme. So, for example, there was one done in the Bay Area around drones, and the idea was how could drones be used for investigative journalism in the most effective way. And it was very much in a sort of hackathon style, and it's often very rough. People come in with sort of not a lot of an agenda. There are some speakers and so on, but it's very much a sort of brainstorming. What can we do around this space? And then I mentioned virtual reality. This is something that there are a number of teams at Google that are looking at this. We have a YouTube 360 team. I'm sure if you haven't heard of Google Jump camera, it's worth looking into. That will be coming out next year. And so we're thinking a lot about how do we connect different newsrooms to the right product teams or the right experts at Google to produce VR content. It's such early days with this. I mean, we could probably, as I say, we could spend an hour just talking about VR and debate it and the value of it and everything else. But I think our role in this right now is just to get the right information into the hands of people who want it. How do we produce it? What are some of the best practices? Gosh, I mean, I talk to folks about the ethics of VR. I mean, we could have an entire discussion about the ethics of VR. I find it's a fascinating area just as a sort of storytelling technique. When is it the best thing to use? When is it not? I'm sure many of you saw the New York Times VR app and the partnership we did with them in Cardboard. That was not our team, by the way, but you know, it's clearly something that's gaining traction. So, what have we learned? Just a few things from our sort of insights and what we've learned over the past 6 months or so of a more public existence. It certainly felt like 2015 was a year of news and tech companies for lots of reasons, not just us. It's rare that we put our competitors on a slide, but obviously there's lots going on, and we certainly acknowledge that. Whether it's Snapchat Discover, we've got, you know, Facebook Instant Articles, Twitter Moments. You know, it really felt like a bit of a year that news and tech. And again, you could sort of dive into the more controversial pieces of this if you wanted to, but it certainly felt like a year where this was being talked about and focused on a lot more by tech companies, which is something that we're excited about. There are plenty of different innovation centers popping up every time we turn around. There's another lab or you can see the lab is probably being a little overused at this point. But it's kind of cool to see that so many different newsrooms are thinking about this stuff. And it's, you know, it's great. We would love to think of a way to sort of work with all of these folks on different projects that they're doing too, sort of bring all the labs together. Data journalism is no longer just some lowly person sitting off in a corner trying to plot things on a map. It's really become much more mainstream. Journalists are expected to understand the value of data, how to present it, and how that works, which is really cool. And so we'll see where that trend continues in 2016. As probably anyone who you've talked to about VR would tell you, the opportunity to gain new empathy or point of view storytelling with any particular subject, whether it's something like the Displaced with the New York Times story or anything else that lends itself to really putting yourself in that person's shoes. And tons of experimentation going on in this space, which is really cool. And I'm sure we're just sort of at the early days. I mean, somebody had a slide the other day with a whole line of cell phones going back to the early brick phones right up to today's super powerful phones. And they said, you know where we are with VR today? We're over here, like one phone over from the brick phone, right? So there's just so much that's happening at a fast pace with that. But we're curious to see where it goes. And then, you know, just the ways to kind of visualize data have changed dramatically. This is something from the op shop that was showing flight data over Thanksgiving. And it's not, you know, this is the kind of thing that doesn't require a computer scientist necessarily. This is not something that, you know, you have to take tons of programming courses for. There are a lot of tools out there today that make this possible for journalists to do of any sort of level, depending on the time you can take to just dig into it a little bit. So, I mentioned some of our contact info. Often this is the part where people actually write something down. So we're on Twitter. You can see both of our handles there. You can certainly reach out to us that way. I would encourage you to follow those for no other reason, because we do post all of our trends visualizations on our trends, the Twitter handle, and then we post a lot about different trainings and tools and tutorials and so on our NewsLab handle. And then the last email address at the bottom there, newslabsupport@google.com. This is an alias that about half the team is on to triage questions about products, something didn't work, trying to do this with Fusion tables, can't get this map to render, etc. So there's, I would say, a few of us on the team that are, I don't count myself among them anymore, but there are a number of people who are very technically oriented and can often answer these questions in a short amount of time, or steer them to the right people internally at Google, which is often half the challenge, just figuring out who can answer these questions. But if you are in a newsroom and you're, you know, working on a project where you think that we can help, please reach out. We do sort of feel like this is our front door, if you will, and we try to leave it open. So I will, I'm just going to pull up the site for the purposes of kind of having it up behind me, but at this point, would love to take questions if anybody has them. Yes, yes. Oh, great. Delayed reaction. Sure.
At the OPC, we're so interested in helping freelancers who have little support. And from your overview, it looks, at first you talked about working with newsrooms, but a lot of it is really geared towards individuals, it seems. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we've done, I would say that our effort with freelancers has probably been driven a lot through the work we do with different partners like, you know, ONA or SPJ or the NABJ or NAHJ, you know, a lot of those organizations where freelancers participate, or OPC, frankly. I mean, the ways that, and I think through our site, you know, we try to sort of steer people to that for that purpose as well. We should probably be doing more, frankly.
I guess my question is by going, if an individual goes to the site, are they able to do a lot, or is most of your work done, you know, by going?
Yeah, I mean, you know, humans don't scale well, so we're sort of bound by just the logistics and everything else to kind of like be in all these places. But we love that. I mean, we love being in newsrooms. That's kind of like our #1 way to get to talk to journalists. But I would say the site does offer as much information, or actually probably much more than we could do in an hour of being in a newsroom, right? So if you really go through the 35 lessons here, and each of them is in our house, so if we go into like the research piece, you can see, you know, some of the topics we're talking about here: advanced search, reverse image search, public data explorer, which is full of tons of international data sets, by the way, which I don't even know that people realize it exists. And then if you go in here, what you'll find is that it's very, we want to, unlike a lot of other sites that want people to stay, we know that journalists are, you know, time poor, right? So we want to make these pieces of curriculum short. So we even say 7 minutes to complete, right? So if you were to do all of these, every single one, walk through all of them, it might take you 2 hours, roughly, and you would have a pretty amazing understanding of how all of Google's products apply to journalism, aside from the ones we haven't put in there yet. But in terms of the existing content, and then, you know, so you get a sort of a quick overview of what it is. You know, how do I reverse image search? I mean, this is a verification technique that I would say, you know, in my experience, more journalists should know that this is even available. This is something that you can do. If you see somebody post some funky picture on Twitter from some event, and you're not, I mean, this happens all the time. All the time. People post pictures. What they said was, oh, there's this gathering in London to protest the something or other, and it's from like 5 years ago. And all you had to do was take that image, run it through reverse image search, and you would see that that's what it's from. And we get people doing this all the time, but I still feel like it's underutilized. And so you could go through here, figure out how to use it. You know, what is image fact checking? How is this done? What's the right process? And then that's it. You're done, right? I mean, you sort of get some examples and then move on to the next one. So hopefully for anybody, whether they're a freelancer or in a newsroom, you know that it's structured the right way. Some of these have got videos attached to them. So, you know, sometimes it's just more interesting to watch someone else do it. Let's see. Let's go to, so here's research. Now, Google Scholar is another one. I mean, finding academic research papers and experts, authoritative figures on different topics. I mean, Google Scholar is full of tons of different subjects and people. Anyway, we also have a YouTube channel, which has got a lot of these in video form as well. If you search for YouTube, Google News Lab. But sorry, that was a long answer to your question. There are 2 others here.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could just quickly go through the tools that you guys provide. No.
Yeah, like the different.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep. So I can do that. I'll do that as quickly as I can. But so I mentioned the research. We've broken it out into different tracks, right? So just to start at the beginning. Start at the beginning. So we have research, report, distribute, and optimize. And that's how we spent a long time internally just thinking about like what's the right point of view for journalists as they think about all these different things. So within each one, we've got, within research, you can see we have search, reverse image search, public data explorer, Google Trends, lots of trends, Google Consumer Surveys, which is a polling tool that you can get a sampling of people on the internet, about 1,000 people on the internet, for relatively low cost on any different topic. There's an entire white paper about the science behind it if you're interested, but it's available in the US, the UK, Australia, Germany, Spain, 5 other countries that I can't remember right now. Google Alerts, Google News Archive, Google Scholar, Google Translate, helpful for people in the room. I'm barely monolingual, so that's helpful for me. And then if you go back and look at report, it's everything from Google Earth and Google Earth Pro, which is free. It used to be that we charged for Google Earth Pro, but it's now available for free. So generating Google Earth animations, showing a different place in the world. Google My Maps, YouTube as a storytelling tool, Google Earth Pro again. Permissions on all of this stuff, which we get asked about a lot. Fusion tables, Google historical imagery, crisis maps, which we produce when there are big disasters that are happening in different parts of the world. Distribute, so here we've got Google Play Newsstand. These are a lot of the platforms that maybe you've heard of. YouTube Creator Academy, how to get your YouTube channel more noticed. Google News, YouTube, Google Plus, and Google News Publisher Center. So some of this stuff is more for the people who think about this than for practicing journalists. And then optimizing, whether it's building more loyal audience on YouTube or account security or Google Analytics. So, and this is again just the beginning when I was talking about adding in virtual reality and verification and security and all that. We're kind of constantly thinking about how do we expand this. So, yeah. I'm sorry, you had another question.
In all honesty, I was going to ask the same question as the 2 previous questions, which was to ask you about the tools that are available for journalists, particularly freelancers.
Yep.
Us guys who are out on our own creating stories, and you've answered that quite a bit. So on the third of those 4 panels, I'll ask you a different question.
Sure.
Because it's nice to be different. You just mentioned it briefly, but it was about, I guess, a way that a journalist, even a freelancer like myself, can access an audience directly. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that, how it works, whether or not there are any freelancers out there who are able to actually make money by going straight to the audience. And second question at that point, is there a problem if there isn't an editor in between the journalist and the reader?
So I'd love to answer your second point, but what did I mention that was allowing you to do that? I can't remember what.
Go back to the page of 1, 2, 3, 4. Where there's tools, utilization, distribute. Okay. And then you opened it up, and then you took us to Google Newsstand. Google Newsstand. Is this like a place where I, as a freelancer, can produce a package?
No.
Oh, okay.
So Google Newsstand is a very business development kind of partnership with different existing news organizations. Unfortunately, it's sort of the opposite of what you're talking about, because this is really for how does The Guardian get its content out to Android users through the Newsstand app?
Okay.
Right? As opposed to sort of a platform for anyone to get their content out to people. YouTube is that, right? In some ways, it's not maybe the best example, but it's a way for anyone, essentially. Now, of course, there's tons of pitfalls in terms of, is this person really a journalist, and how do you authenticate what you're seeing? And I can't think of another one where there's sort of no barrier to publishing content with what we have. A lot of what we have is sort of the next place that a lot of already vetted and edited content then goes to live. But yeah. Yeah.
Where are the actual tools? These are all videos teaching us how to use them. Where are the tools?
Yeah, often there are links here to all of them, but the best way to find any of them is just search, right?
I see a list here, Google search, that's the regular Google, Google Maps, YouTube. So we just go to these places.
Yeah, you just search for them. That's the easiest way to find them. Google Earth right now is a separate client, right? So it's something you have to actually download and have on your computer. But everything else we're talking about is all web-based. So if you want to find Google Consumer Surveys, you just put in Google Consumer Surveys. It's the first one, right? I get people asking for links and stuff all the time. It's just the best way to do it is to search for the name of it. So.
One more question.
Yeah.
On the slide where you have YouTube, you said verified clips or whatever.
Yep.
What does verified mean?
Oh, what a great question. I mean, we honestly could go on to talk about this a lot, but so verified means different things to different people, but ultimately, I think at the core is that the video that you're seeing, represents, it is of the event that it purports to be. It's on the date that it's supposed to be. It was the right permissions were granted to use it in some capacity, right? I mean, the sort of like core means to say, this video is from this, and here you go, audience, we're verifying this as a news organization. So we have an entire, so here. We go to the first draft. The coalition just launched their website. Let's see if it's. Go. So if you go to firstdraftnews.com, this is a site that they just launched. I think it was actually last week. And this is something that grew out of that coalition. And this is a place where any newsroom can go to read about what are sort of the best practices with verification, what are the steps. At one end of the spectrum with verification is doing nothing about it, where you just find a video and you think, that looks fine, and you post it or include it in a story, and it's just out there. Could be right, could be wrong, it's just a roll of the dice, right? Let's use it. On the other end of the spectrum, you talk directly to the person who shot that video. You know that that's the person. They say, yes, that's me. Yes, you could use it, right? That's in a perfect world. We all know that probably doesn't happen. So what is sort of like the spectrum in the middle, right? You take best effort to contact them. Do they verify it through email? How do you know enough about this? Storyful, by the way, as an entity, has a lot of information about this. They use verification techniques that include satellite imagery, right, where you can compare what a video looks like to different satellite images. They have a huge human component where they just talk to people locally who would know, did this video showing a bombing in Iraq actually happen in this neighborhood? Because there's just enough of a network of people who can do this kind of thing. There's a guy named Elliot Higgins. So if you really want to get into this stuff, there's a guy named Elliot Higgins who's behind a site called Bellingcat. And he does some unbelievable verification work, all through free available tools online, whether it's something like Google Earth, Google Maps. He uses YouTube videos, he looks at the social accounts. He and his team tracked MH17.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah,
amazing.
it's unbelievable the kind of work that he does and his team, looking at different images that are posted, YouTube videos, comparing those against each other. Some of the Russian soldiers have social media accounts where they post, pictures of the rocket launcher and the numbers on there, and you can verify where it was and the dates. I mean, just all kinds of amazing stuff to verify, different videos and imagery. So I guess it's, sort of a bit of a Pandora's box, but it's fascinating how it can be done so well and with not a lot of sort of additional resources, but there are still, a good number of newsrooms that just don't take the time and the effort to do it. So, yeah. All right, well, thanks for spending your Thursday night listening to me talk about the News Lab. And as I say, we're more than happy to hear from folks, and by all means, provide some feedback. We're not a black box. We're constantly hearing from journalists on all kinds of things, and trying to refine what we do. So, yeah. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for coming to us.
I'm from Zurich. You have
Oh,
a
great.
picture of Zurich. Where is that?
Yeah.
Is it at the newspaper or?
Where,
Do you remember? No, you just have a picture of a